So now we are going to talk about the second part of our lesson about combining integers. So now we're going to talk about combining numbers with different signs. Again, make sure you're writing these down in your notes. All right, this is what I mean by that. Again, I'm using the word combining. I'm not saying adding and subtracting because I don't want you guys to get confused when you see a plus sign versus a minus sign. I want you to just follow these rules. So when you have two numbers with different signs and you're combining them, what you're going to really be doing, if they're different signs, is you're going to actually be subtracting them. And then keeping the sign of the bigger number. And when I say bigger number, I really mean bigger absolute value. All right? So this is what I mean by that. So if I were to give you a problem and it said -7 plus 3. I don't want you to look at the plus sign and think, oh, I'm adding. Again, you're going to look at the value of each number. So the 7 we know is negative because there is a negative sign in front of it. The 3, on the other hand, is positive because there is no negative sign, right? There's no negative sign in front of it. So one is positive and one is negative. This time they're not the same sign. They're different signs. So what I just said in my last note to you guys is that when they are different signs, we are going to subtract the two numbers, right? So when they are the same sign, we added them. But when they're different signs, we're going to actually subtract them. So we're going to take the -7. Yeah, I know it says negative, but you're going to think of it as just 7 and then -3. We're subtracting right now because they're different signs. So 7 minus 3 is 4. And then the last part of my note said keep the sign with the bigger absolute value. So if we look at -7 and we look at +3, which one has the greatest absolute value? Remember, absolute value means distance from 0, and absolute value is always positive. So if we look at both the -7 and the 3, we know that -7 has a bigger absolute value, and it's negative. So my final answer would be -4. And if you think about a number line, that would make sense. If you're at 0 here, or not at 0, there is 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Here's -7, and here's +1, 2, 3. All right? Actually, we don't really even need the +3 there, but you can see that we're starting at -7. So we're starting right there on the number line, and then it's a +3. Positive means we're going to the right. If it was negative, we'd be going to the left. So we're going +1, 2, 3. So now we're right there, which is -1, 2, 3. This is -4, which is what my final answer was. So if you need a number line to help you, that's fine, but you should hopefully be able to follow the rules that I'm giving you to solve them. So I'm going to give you a practice one. All right, I want you to pause the video, try this one, and then we will discuss it once you're done. All right, let's talk about it. All right, so we're going to look at the value of each number. We're not going to automatically start to add just because it says plus. Instead, we're going to look at the 23. It's negative, and I know that because there's a negative sign in front of it. I look at the 11. The 11 is positive because there is no negative sign in front of it. So they are different signs. One is negative and one is positive. So when they're different signs, we subtract. So we're going to say 23 minus 11, and 23 minus 11 is going to give you 12. Now, we're not done. We have to figure out what sign it has. So we're going to keep the sign of the bigger absolute value. 23, -23, has a bigger absolute value than 11. So since that is negative, our final answer is negative. So the answer would be -12. I'm going to give you another one to try. -4 plus 12. Pause it, try it, and we will talk about it. All right, now that you've tried it, let's talk about it. The -4 has a negative sign in front of it, so we know it is negative. The 12, on the other hand, does not have a negative sign in front of it, so it is positive. So we're going to say when they're different signs, we're going to subtract them. So we'll do the bigger number minus the smaller number. So 12 minus 4 is 8. And then we keep this sign of the bigger absolute value. So which has a bigger absolute value, -4 or 12? Well, 12 is further away from 0 than -4 is. So 12 is positive, so my final answer is +8, not -8. All right? If you want to think of it this way, you can rewrite it. The 12, since it's positive, you could put in the front, and the 4 is negative, so you could put it in the back. That's the same thing as saying 12 minus 4, because let's think about it. The 12 is positive, just like it was positive here, and the 4 here, even though it looks positive, it's actually negative because there's a negative sign in front of it. So it's negative. So that is the same exact problem. The values of each number are the same. All right. Let's do another one together. What if I say 17, actually let me do that in a different color. 17 plus, and then I'll put in parentheses, -9. Now, I know that the parentheses might look a little bit confusing, but the parentheses literally mean nothing. It's just separating the negative part from the plus sign. So we're going to do the same thing as we did before. We're going to look at the 17 first, and there's no negative sign in front of it, so it's positive. I'll look at the 9 next. Well, the 9 has a negative sign in front of it, so it's negative. So they are different signs. It doesn't matter that it says add or plus. That doesn't matter. Instead, we're going to say, okay, we have two different signs, a positive number and a negative number. So we're going to actually subtract them because when they have different signs, we subtract. So 17 minus 9 is going to give you 8. Now we have to decide whether it's going to be a positive 8 or a -8. Let me rewrite that in black so it doesn't look like it's negative necessarily. All right, so we have 8, and like I said, we have to look at both numbers. So which one is bigger, that has a bigger absolute value, 17 or -9? Well, 17 has a bigger absolute value and it's positive, so your final answer is positive. That plus sign is not important. That plus sign means nothing. You could rewrite this as 17 minus 9. That's the same exact thing. The 17 right now is positive and the 9 is negative. Either way you want to look at it, it's the same exact problem. That plus sign doesn't make a difference. That's why I don't want you to think of it as, oh, it says plus, I need to add. Oh, it says minus, I need to subtract. You need to look at the value of each number and then follow the rules that I gave you. All right? All right. Now, what happens when there are more than two numbers that are being combined together? So something like, let's do another one. What about something like this? All right, -500 plus 600 plus 200. When you have more than two numbers that you're combining together, I want you to separate it and do two of the numbers at first and then the last number at the end. So we're just going to look at the first two numbers that say -500 and then the plus 600. So let's look at the first two numbers, and the 500 is negative because there's a negative sign in front of it. The 600 is positive because there is a positive, or there's no negative sign. It's not because there's a positive sign, it's because there's no negative sign in front of it. So this one's positive. So right now we should notice that the signs are different. So the signs are different, we're really going to subtract. So we'll take the bigger number, which is 600, and we'll subtract the smaller number. So 600 minus 500 is going to give you 100. And then we keep the sign of the bigger absolute value. What has a bigger absolute value, -500 or 600? Well, 600 does. So the answer is positive 100, but that's just for those two numbers, positive 100. Now we need to include this next part, which is the plus 200. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to look at those two numbers. Well, the 100 is positive because there's no negative sign in front of it. So is the 200. The 200 doesn't have a negative sign in front of it either, so they're both positive. Now we have to think back to the last video that we talked about when the signs are the same. If the signs are the same, I said you're actually going to add them. So we're going to do 100 plus 200, which is 300. And when the signs are the same, you just keep the sign. So they're both positive. So your final answer there is positive 300. So anytime you have three numbers all together, you need to do them piece by piece to add them or subtract them and combine them. So I'm going to give you guys one to try. All right. All right. So pause this, work this out, and then we will discuss it. All right, now that you've tried it, let's talk about it. So we're going to look at the first two numbers first, the 14 and the 8. So the 14 is a negative 14 because there's a negative sign in front of it. The 8 is also negative. There is a negative sign in front of it. Right there, there's that negative sign right in front of it. So it's negative. So we'll work with these two numbers first. We'll say, okay, they both have the same sign. So when they have the same sign, we're actually adding them. So we're going to say 14 plus 8, which is going to be 22, I believe. Yep. And then when they're the same sign, you add them and keep the sign. They are both negative, so your answer is negative 22, but that's just for those two numbers. Now don't forget that there's another part to the problem. It says plus 2. We're going to add that right there, plus 2. And we're going to do the same thing as before. We're going to look at the value of each number. All right, this 22 is negative because it has a negative sign in front of it. This 2, on the other hand, does not have a negative sign in front of it, so it's positive. Now the signs are different. So when the signs are different, we're actually going to subtract them. So we're going to say 22 minus 2 is going to give you 20. And then which one has an greater absolute value? Well, that would be the 22. And it is negative. So your answer is negative 20. That's your final answer, is negative 20 there. All right. All right. I'm going to give you one more note that's important. Okay, this is very important. Whenever you have two negative signs sitting right next to each other, it's going to turn into a plus sign. Please, please, please write this down. This is important. We're going to talk about it and do some practice problems, but please write that down. All right, so let's do a practice problem. If you need to pause it to keep writing, that's fine, but I'm going to keep going, and when you're done, you just play it again. All right, so this is what I mean by that. If I said something like 6 minus negative 9. All right, again, don't worry about the parentheses, but do you see how you have two negative signs literally sitting right next to each other? If they're sitting right next to each other, then what that means is that really turns into a plus sign. So this whole thing right there turns into a plus sign. So now it turns into 6 plus 9. That's what the new problem says. And then you'll do the same thing as you did before. So you would say, okay, the 6 is positive because there's no negative sign. The 9 is positive because there's no negative sign. So they're both positive. They're the same sign. So when they're the same sign, we're going to add. So that gives you a 15. And then you're going to keep the sign of positive. So but you don't really need to write that plus sign. You would just say positive 15. All right. I'm going to show you another one. I'm going to let you practice this one first, and then we'll talk about it. So if I said negative 11 minus negative 10. All right, I want you to pause it and then try it. All right, Now that you've tried it, you need to look before you do anything and see if you have two negative signs sitting next to each other, which you do. They're sitting right next to each other. This only is the case if they're sitting right next to each other. So this now turns into a plus. So your new problem now says negative 11, that stays the same, but that 10 no longer has a negative sign in front of it because those two negative signs turned into a plus sign. So now that just is plus, because it turned into a plus sign, and then 10. And now we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to say, okay, let's look at the value of each number. The 11 is negative because there's a negative sign, and the 10 is going to be positive because there is no negative sign. I might have said that incorrectly. The 11 is negative because there is a negative sign. The 10 is positive because there is not a negative sign. So the signs are now different. So when they're different, we should be subtracting. So we're going to say 11 minus 10 is 1, and then we keep the sign of the bigger number. And if we look at the two of them, or I should say the bigger absolute value, 11 has a greater absolute value than 10, and it's negative, so that means your final answer is negative 1. All right? That is our lesson. Make sure you're doing the assignment on Canvas that goes along with this, and if you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.